All right. So we'll be recording and you can ask any question you would like as I get, oh, here's a mess. Oh, is it hot or what? I'm dying over here. Questions. No questions from you people? There's got to be a question. No question? Any question? You'll put in the chat anything? Nothing? So I should talk, but you've heard me too much as it is. So, but I will talk since no one here seems to have a question.
I have.
Oh, good.
Sorry, I have a random question. I've been thinking about it a lot. For example, because I'm wondering if I want to write my paper on this, would everything that's happening like in the Senate with like Tuberville, would that be like an example of national security? Because it's kind of directly and indirectly affecting.
Right. I'm very open on the paper. So if we're going to begin with a paper question, that's fine. I'm very open. So you can basically do anything you want. So I think that would be fine. Anything else on that? Crystalline?
I got it. Thank you.
All right. So I'll just go over this really quick. Oh, hold on. So the documentary on terror in Europe, this shows basically a whole ton of issues. The marginalization of certain Muslim groups, problems with intelligence sharing, growing national security problem as we saw in Europe, etc., which still exists today, not just from quote unquote Muslim groups, but also from right-wing groups, other groups that are very, very important. So what else you had, that will definitely be on it. And as well, Dora Maria Tejas. If you've had me before, you know that she represents what? Who knows what?
Isn't it?
Sorry, go ahead, one of you.
Go ahead.
Crystalline, you were going to say? I think.
Isn't it basically just like interpretation methods?
Right.
Like
Exactly. No, you're right. It's intersubjective understanding of the world. So what is a terrorist? And this is really important for national security, because if you go into a country, right, and you try to invade it and you say, oh, we're going in as freedom fighters, are you freedom fighters in the eyes of the people, right? Vietnam is consistently an example, which I think is a good but yet lamentable example of how we kind of supported Diem and these kind of brutal leaders, and said the Viet Cong, were terrorists, but a lot of people saw us as terrorists. John Kerry himself, who's in Joe Biden's administration, called soldiers terrorists. He was actually in the war. So this is really, really important. So that's really good, Crystalline. You got it exactly. And Josh, what were you going to say?
Oh, she took the words out of my mouth.
All right, there you go. So that's really important. Elliot Abrams is on there, and he represents, the reason I'm putting him on here is that he still is in government. He was actually involved in the Iran-Contra affair, but it was kind of interesting because it was the politicization of intelligence. So, sorry, kid came home. Elliot Abrams is in all these administrations, which I don't understand. He's been somewhat of a failure for me. No one has to agree with me. But regardless, it has to do with the politicization of intelligence. This is a guy that, was obsessed with intervention across the world. And they put him in charge of Venezuelan politics, the Biden administration. He was in the Reagan administration, was obsessed with supporting the Contra, which were basically most Nicaraguans saw them as terrorists. In Nicaragua, we called them freedom fighters. So it really represents the politicization of intelligence in that video. Barcelona is definitely on there. Who remembers the Barcelona, Catalonia? What's going on there? I showed photos. Barcelona, what does that represent? Kind of similar here. Anyone remember? I hope someone remembers. Is this the right class? Anyone? Barcelona?
I'm forgetting, but I know Catalonia, they speak a different language.
Right.
So
That's definitely true. And I did a big thing on that in my global politics class. This one about the photos of Barcelona, when I was in Barcelona, it really showed how, the people, many in Barcelona, Catalonia, that these political prisoners, well, these people in prison are actually political prisoners. And from their point of view, it was a crackdown on Catalonia by the Spanish government, as I talked about, where they would literally stop the independence vote, crack down. They were dragging people away from the polls, etc. Now, if that was Venezuela or North Korea, the United States, would say, "Oh, we need sanctions on them, etc." But they really don't. We don't do that. Why? Because allies, and this is going to be a huge thing, which I'm going to put on there. That's not in there. Angola, Niger, all these places. You just saw a coup in Niger. Oh, remember that. I'm definitely putting this on there. So we just saw a coup in Niger, right? The United States of America is against the coup, not because we support democracy, because now there are leaders that are kind of going towards Russia. Ironically, the coup leader studied in the School of the Americas. They call it the School of the Americas in Fort Benning, Georgia. But there's other people there too who, are known for human rights abuses. So it's no surprise that he was involved in a coup. It's interesting now because I see, you don't have to agree with the world with me, that we're living in another Cold War where allies are the most important thing. So there was just a good article showing that we lost bases in drone areas in Niger, key assets in Africa after the coup. And I think that that's where we seem to be going. So the United States is going to be even more reluctant to put on any kind of sanctions or anything else on key political allies, regardless of human rights abuses or anything else. And this is kind of going in the same direction. And that's the whole point of the Angola video, where I show in the back I believe it was the State Department came out, but the U.S. government with grants for people like me to go to Angola. I've never been to Angola, but to go and create quote unquote soft power. So they start, going on our side, because in a lot of ways, Russia has done relatively well, love him or hate him, Putin that is, on getting key African allies. So that's kind of like the overall arching argument in the idea of Barcelona, right? We're never going to put sanctions on a country that's such a key ally like Spain. But what's interesting is now with so many countries going towards Russia, Russia has done well at getting countries on its side. And not, exerting the sanctions or anything else. I find it just fascinating how Saudi Arabia, obviously it goes without saying, China, but also Thailand, African nations, etc. In fact, I had a student who was in this class. He's from Africa. And he said, he actually came to my house when he was in Tempe, and he actually said that the Africans are really tilting towards Russia. But then he tried, because he's not for the war, and he knows, U.S. imperialism as well. But his argument was, think about a neighboring country attacking us, like Kenya. I think it was from Burkina Faso, but he was living in Kenya, working for Amnesty International. So it was a pretty interesting thing how he was saying so many Africans are going, and that's part of national security. That's really interesting. But you people have to talk because I don't want to talk too much. National security, Vietnam, Sandino, that's all about powers ambiguous. I think that's important. You know, we lost Nicaragua, we lost Vietnam. These are very poor countries. And, you know, will Russia, quote unquote, lose the Ukraine? The Ukraine's a smaller nation, but will it be able to hold out against the Russians? And I really enjoyed all of your videos. I've been watching your debates have been really good. Nagasaki, Hiroshima, and stuff. Very interesting. Now, what you need to know about the 2004 Intelligence and Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act is that reform has become kind of a buzzword, and we kind of failed. It just created more bureaucracy. If you read that kind of book, well, the chapters I laid out, you don't have to buy the book anymore. It basically, you know, he likes uncertainty. And, you know, instead of like, we can predict. And a big problem with the 2004 Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act was the CIA lost a lot of power. It created more bureaucracy, and it never really streamlined the intelligence like it wanted to say. But the CIA, Lowenthal, I used a book by a man named not Lowenthal, was Paul Pillar, and they're from the CIA, so they're biased against this reform because it actually took away power of the CIA. Eduardo Sagaro is really important when we get into spying, because he's a really interesting character where he essentially was a CIA spy, but then he was a double agent, which means he was giving that information to Cuba. And it's really interesting because, you know, the idea of like, again, intersubjective understanding, the idea that, oh, you know, we don't like Cuba, therefore the Cubans hate Cuba, but there's a lot of Cubans in Cuba that like Cuba and are against the United States policies. And that's the same thing that goes for Russian, Iran, or any kind of neighboring or any kind of imperialist power. Current and crisis driven is going to be on there. That's often we fail to address other issues with long-term consequences. You know, it's kind of interesting how a zeitgeist is created, if you took my empirical inquiry class, by, you know, these, you know, 9/11, the COVID, etc. And a lot of the times countries aren't prepared for these because we're just kind of doing ad hoc things. So, you know, there was no really big pandemic, the bird flu, etc. Ebola was a serious thing, but never really hit the United States. So we never really, I think, developed a lot of national security policies in this because we were more into a crisis current driven mode, meaning whatever is the spirit of the times. You know, if we're in the Cold War, it's just Russia. If we're in another time, it's, you know, something else. So we kind of dropped the ball in a lot of ways with certain things that might have long-term consequences. And I think the fall of the Berlin Wall is a good example because we really didn't care about it. No, interrupt. I want you to interrupt. What? I was crushing in some delivery. Oh, okay. No problem. I didn't know what you were going to say. Oh, well, thanks for coming. Deliveries. That's a tough job. Gas is expensive. So all of this is very important for national security policy. So if you go into national security policy, one of the interesting things is they'll ask you, you know, questions that are zeitgeist now, that is spirit of the time. But there's a lot of issues out there that aren't being addressed because, you know, right? In fact, I kiddingly say, there's no more COVID because Russia invaded the Ukraine, and we as human beings don't have the intellectual capability to deal with two different things, you know, at the same time. So it's like, oh man, there's no more COVID because of that. Now that's obviously not true completely, but it is interesting how one crisis will replace the next instead of, you know, maybe focusing on more long-term planning. Distance school, 100%. Intelligence analysts who are too close to power often become politicized. Politicization is historically something I'm really interested in because I think a lot of policymakers want to see the world in a certain way. You could say that about Putin, right? He, you know, just want to believe that, you know, the Ukraine would fall sooner than it did. And then he just goes and gets people that, you know, kind of support his ideas. This isn't something that's just Russian or Putin. This is something I think in war itself. In fact, one of the interesting things about the Vietnam War, we fired in the State Department many people who were saying that we wouldn't be able to win the war. So I found it kind of interesting that priority creep, very similar to this stuff. This happens a lot. My example is in like swing states like Florida, because it has a lot of the more richer Latinos that go there, say from Venezuela, Nicaragua, etc. So we start focusing on these countries and want to exert pressure, sanctions on Venezuela, for example. And that's what priority creep is, like these policies and ideas that creeping into the government, attributable mainly to lobbyists. So people start looking at these things. Like if we didn't have Florida and Florida wasn't a key battleground, probably we wouldn't have had sanctions on Cuba so long, Venezuela, etc. It's like Vietnam. Vietnam's not a democracy. The Vietnamese people here did not want to open up relations, but that's their problem because, they're not in a swing state. Vietnamese are like all over the country, and they're not in any swing states, like a lot in California, but that's not a swing state. So you got to be in a swing state for people to listen to you. Obviously, we talked a lot about downward politicization. That's incentives for a consumer. Assume a consumer gives to the intelligence analyst in order to, kind of get what they want. So, you help me, I help you. That happens a lot in bureaucracies. It's probably even thicker in somewhere like Russia. We have seen people get fired if they don't kind of go with the Putin line, like Wagner Group. But that's pretty interesting how they wanted to go after the government and Putin won. I personally, and I'd love a disagreement here, I think that whole, if you followed it, the Wagner Group standing up, quote unquote, to Putin, really solidified Putin's power because it was just knocked down so quickly that it really showed who was in charge. And people got nervous, like, oh my God, if I go against Putin, I'm going to get sent to Belarus with Lukashenko. So I think that that solidified its power. But if you disagree, I'd love to hear it. Because in the Western media, it was all like, oh, look at people beginning to challenge Putin and stuff. But I don't think that it really went anywhere. And in fact, it showed that Putin came out saying, look, I'm in charge here, no more. Counterintelligence, what does it aim to do? All of that, protect your own intelligence from espionage, stop economic espionage, detect spies. Very difficult. Aldrich Ames, Robert Hansen, among others, Eduardo Sagaro, which I just mentioned. These are very difficult to root out because money matters. Robert Hansen from the FBI and Aldrich Ames of the CIA, I'm pretty sure it was the CIA, correct me if I'm wrong, were getting paid a lot of money. Then there's people who actually believe in what they're doing. So it's very difficult to root these people out, but that's the whole goal of counterintelligence. In fact, I think I brought it up before here. There's a girl who took this class and another, etc. She's being investigated by the FBI for being, helping Russia spread information, etc. Really good student though. So if she was a spy, that's no problem with me. She was a great student. Collection swarm, same thing with all these others, hot topics go in, it could be attributable to a number of things, but then we lose something. In fact, I don't know if I gave it to this class, but there was a really good BBC article on like 21 crises that are going on that you've never heard of, things that kind of get pushed to the side. Unfortunately, upward politicization, the intelligence analyst aims to please the consumer. Edward Bernays is very important. That Guatemala, if you saw it, is all about propaganda. See, that's one of the things that's interesting. National security just doesn't exist. You need propaganda. Like when Putin says something like denazification of the Ukraine, people are like, oh man, that's crazy. How could anyone buy it? But we do that all the time. If we didn't like anyone during the Cold War, what did we say? We just call them a communist. And they'd be like, well, I'm not a communist. It doesn't matter. We don't like you. So we're going to call you a communist. Putin is doing kind of the same propaganda game as you saw in that Edward Bernays thing, denazification of Ukraine. And I don't like Putin or the war, but before all this happened years ago, that's all you heard about the Ukraine was the Nazi groups. So he's actually not, saying these kind of crazy things that people aren't buying into. I mean, it might be crazy, to go to war for that, but we do it all the time because someone's communist. And a lot of groups aren't communist, and that's what Edward Bernays said. Lindsay Moran, really important. Main point, all that stuff about women, maternity issues. You've got, women are more conscious of their surroundings. People often trust women more, etc. That's very important. And if you are interested in going to the CIA, they do love women. They think people open up to women. They think they do more for getting information, etc. Goodwill. I love Goodwill. Everything I buy from Goodwill. Trickle down effect, high tech. Let me make sure I'm in the one I'm supposed to be in. All right, final exam. That's it. Because didn't we do one on that already? I thought we had a question on that. And then Timothy McVeigh, Shinrikyo. Very important, all that anthrax. Why is it? That's technological trickle-downness. So if that's a word, trickle-downness. All of our technology is good. Look at what we're doing now, right? You could be anywhere in the world, maybe not North Korea. Oh, what do you think of that guy that crossed the border? You should watch a great video on crossing the line. It's about going into North Korea, and the guy built a life for himself. But besides North Korea, we can do anything we want, right? We're here. Technology is good, but what about the negative externalities of technology? And that's what McVeigh, Shinrikyo, anthrax, people getting their holds on that. I think kids are going to be doing bombs, drones, etc. Pretty easily. Whew, that was a lot. Now, any questions or comments on all that? I have to hear someone's voice. You don't want me just talking. Or you can type it. Are you alive there? I see you, so you're okay. All right, Josh. That's great. You're in the Taj Mahal. All right. Any questions about, okay, and if someone wrote in the community forum, then I'll just kind of break from the final. There's a lot of points. Someone wrote, hey, I only got a B, but I have like a gazillion points. Then if you reach the 100, you'll get A+, right? Don't go by the Canvas letter. Canvas doesn't incorporate all these extra points we get. And I think the extra points are fair, because it's you're taking all these quizzes, there's so much information, so it's like you literally could fail a bunch of quizzes and still get an A+, which I think is fair, because there's a ton of information in the class, right? You're not gonna know everything, so it gives you kind of the chance to kind of bounce back. Let's say you miss a discussion board, etc. All right, let's see. Could you go back to Anthony? Oh, yeah, that's just trickle down. That's what Timothy McVeigh, Shinrikyo, they used the sarin gas attack. See, one of the things that's interesting about, all this technology is that, you look at the pressure cooker in Boston, people can make these things quite readily. And anthrax, that's more because I remember when anthrax became a big thing, people were like, oh, don't read your mail, there's going to be anthrax on it. Some of you, what I like about the online class, there are more adults here, so you might remember too, opposed to our kids who are really young. But it's really interesting because, technology is great, but there's also that kind of negative externality to it, that spin-off, where people can do bad things with it, and it's not as difficult as one would seem. And this is what we're going to talk, nuclear capability is a big thing. And, as more and more countries get nuclear capability, will it trickle down to more and more? I mean, will we have a day when Haiti's going to have bombs? And look at it's a lamentable situation in Haiti with all the gangs, etc. What is going to happen in the long run with all this technology? It's good, but there is a negative part for national security. So that's where the anthrax, all those biotech, Shinrikyo, and I think it was 1994, I want to say, hit the subway of Tokyo with the sarin gas attack, which I talk about. So these are lamentable situations. What else do we have? It definitely alliances, propaganda. upward, downward politicization, collection swarm, all those things with collection swarm, current crisis, etc. Current and crisis driven, they're very similar. They're basically being hijacked by certain reasons, and they're not dumb reasons. I mean, obviously, Russia invades Ukraine. We need people, who know this situation, but that's the problem. I remember when the Cold War, when the Berlin Wall fell. Years later, I tried studying Russian, and there were only like 3 or 4 people in the class. What happened? Well, no one cared about it. That's problematic because, Russia has, I mean, look at its population, look at its, history, look at its, just development of oil and gas reserves. I mean, it is a major power. And I think, in my opinion, you don't have to agree, we kind of dropped the ball by just saying, oh, Russia's just, down and out. Who cares? No, now it's really reasserted itself. So, I think that whole thing about like ignoring things just because, oh, the Cold War is over, there's no more, there's no more Russia. Like, it doesn't exist practically. It was a big mistake. And then we downsized the CIA and got rid of a lot of people who knew Russia. Condoleezza Rice is one of them. A lot of people don't know she's a Russian expert. From my understanding, she speaks Russian. And she couldn't even get a job at Columbia. So, this is kind of one of the things I think is very, very important. What else? Now, if you are going to do the internship, it's kind of cool. Watch the video, but I'm going to also send out a link where you're going to upload it. She sent it to me. I want to make sure students can get access. If they can't, I'll make sure I'll get it to her. No, only on the good question, John. Only on the last, 4 modules, because up to the midterm, from the midterm on, because I forget sometimes is it 4 or 3 because these classes move so quickly, but nothing that's before in the midterm. And then things we talked about today, like I like the alliance, Angola, Niger just had a coup. Very, very important for the alliance-based system. What are we losing from that? In fact, I'll send out an article on that if you people haven't been reading about that. Usually lamentably, coups in Africa don't get much attention. But now with the whole, scramble for Africa thing, it's very, very important. Do we get a point for it? Yeah. And remember, Josh, get rid of it after. I'm not doing this. I'm not making, I'm not rich off my YouTube channel. In order to get rich, you got to be a little kid playing video games or some TikTok star or something like that, which I am not any of those. I do that as a, okay, well, don't worry, I'll get you. I usually give everyone the point anyways, but I do that more as a, what would one say, a insurance. Because, you always get grade complaints. So I say, well, you didn't even know I said subscribe to the YouTube channel. And then I can see who watches and stuff like that. I use YouTube to protect my intellectual property right. As I said before, many will say it's not very intellectual, but that's what I use it for. Because if you upload it on ASU, it becomes theirs. I was shocked. I'm like, and then I read the rules, and it does become theirs. And I'm like, oh, you're not getting this. You know what I mean? Why should I give you my stuff? So that's the reason I use YouTube. It's a good platform. And then I get people from all over the world who watch it. They sometimes reach out and stuff. So it's kind of cool. Anything else? Because I don't want to keep you too long. Are you all graduating or are you taking classes? Oh, go ahead, Stormy.
I was actually wondering about the final paper. I didn't know if we could talk about that yet.
Yeah, go ahead. Crystalline already asked that question. Go ahead.
I was wondering because on one of your videos it says to get to 5 pages, and then on the Canvas it says get to 6 pages.
Yeah, I would hit the 6th. Sorry about that. Because during the COVID, I kind of made it a little smaller and stuff like that. For this one, I would hit the 6th. I mean, if you hit full 5 pages, that's great. But I would hit the 6th to make it full 5 pages.
Okay. And then the other thing I was wondering is, from the video, it seems that you just want us to touch on fake news, but it could be any topic as long as.
Okay, that would be the internship, because the final paper is anything. It doesn't have to be on fake news.
Oh, okay.
If you want to do something on fake news and the internship, that would be the internship that she collects these paper and uses it for her company. This is sanctioned. This isn't some weirdo in my alley who asked me to tell you to do it. This is sanctioned by Crow, ASU, and everything else. So it's them. It's not just someone who said, "Hey, you go tell this person say this," right? To do it. The internship is a way. What they wanted to do was ASU wanted to kind of diversify students. You know how ASU wants to do all these different things, right? So, and I always say as a joke, I'm waiting for ASU only fans. You know what I mean? Because they want to be the head of everything. So anyways, the point of this is to get students some kind of experience, even if it's limited in an internship. And then you can watch that video on the resume, which is pretty cool how you can put it on. So if you choose that internship one that's on fake news, then it would any subject you want. People have been emailing me, can I do it on this? And I'm like, yeah, that's great. No one's ever done it before. So any question is fine, is any subject if you want to do that. But then if you do fake news, it would probably go into that area of the internship.
Okay, I just want to make sure. And then they're just due at the same exact time.
Yeah, they're both due. You just upload them and then in the Canvas. And then she sent me another link I have to look at. She wants students to upload them instead of emailing. Also, if you get, and I did give it a point, if you get a chance, watch that interview with the Harvard student I do. It's really good. She comes from ASU. She got into Harvard Law School, and she gives really good advice about interviews, resume, cover letters, etc. I really like it. It's 40 minutes long. You don't have to watch the whole thing. You skip around, which I'm sure most people do. But it's very good. And I think there is a discussion board, and then you get a point for watching it. But it's more of a professional development thing. Anything else? So, well, go ahead, Chris.
The internship paper, I took a class like your other class like a few weeks ago, the summer A one, and I sent in my internship paper and I didn't hear anything back. So should I resend it or?
You'd have to do another one to get credit. I just look at them and then you'll get the points for doing it. Did you want feedback from her or something?
No, I just wasn't sure if she got it or anything.
Oh, if you sent it to her in the email, she got it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Oh, okay. Actually, you probably could do the same. I mean, she's probably not gonna know. So that's one of the things you can do with this. So yeah, you could probably do it. Yeah, I remember you're in the empirical inquiry.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so all this interpretive methods, intersubjective is easy for you now. Any other questions on this? I don't want to take up people's time. Josh?
I have a curious question about you mentioned a few times that the agency came to you. How did they know that you were there for 8 years, and how did they know you existed, and how did they come to you?
I had some back and forth with them from the site. I won't get into how they like people who lived abroad, but then they started saying also, well, you lived abroad kind of too long. And I said, oh, okay, I understand. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do anyways. But one of the things about the agency, they're funny. And the guy admitted it. He goes, I know on the one hand, we want people like you who, really lived abroad for so long. But on the other hand, they think you become a security threat. So I didn't end up getting any fly out or anything like that. As we talked about before, my friend did, and someone else talked about their experience. I think it was in this class. But yeah, that's that they know. I mean, they don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't think they're following everyone around and stuff like that. But I had kind of a back and forth with them, and then I went in, and then they called me, and we did some kind of stuff, which I thought was kind of interesting. Go ahead. Could you pronounce your name again? Habilov.
Oh, sorry. That's my that's just my nickname.
Oh, okay.
It's Xavier. It's Xavier Javier in Spanish.
Oh, Javier. Yeah.
Yes. Or on the comments I put who will grade the internship paper?
Yeah, I look at it when you do it. You'll probably get most of the points or all the points anyways, because one of the things about the internship, which is interesting, is they don't really give you the best, and I understand that, rubric. All it fake news. What does that mean? I did send out a couple that they thought were good. You know, it was just they sent me a bunch and then I just arbitrarily picked two. So don't be upset if you know someone wasn't on there. But you know, you'll get the points for doing it as long as it's not crap.
And my second question, do I submit it just as normal as an assignment?
Yeah, in the Canvas, there's a final paper internship.
Oh, because you mentioned email, that's why I got confused. You said
Yeah,
send
you
it.
know, she wanted it emailed, and now you have to definitely upload it in Canvas. But in addition, she sent me a website, which before it's due, I know these classes go so fast, it's going to be due soon, that she wanted either me or the student to upload, and that's what I have to figure out. So,
Okay,
so as
thank you.
long as you upload it to Canvas, you'll definitely get points.
Sounds good. I have one last question at the end of the class, so I'll just wait until the end of the class. Thank you.
Well, I think that's the end now. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, so did you want to ask me a question, or is it personal nature that no one else can be here? Or?
Not really. It's just everybody's question. It's not really related to maybe it is national security. So the co-founder of ChatGPT, his name is, I forgot his name.
Oh, by the way, I don't mean to
recently-
cut you off, Javier. You can go if you want. I should actually stop recording it because I don't want people to. This isn't going to be on the exam or anything.
No, yeah, it's not.
Right.